Hello everyone. In the previous video, we looked at the APIs from the SAP Gateway demo system to complete our exercise. Now we will delve into the exercise itself. We will break the exercise into two parts. Part one, we will focus on creating the APIs on API Business Hub Enterprise. And then in part two, we will look at cloud integration. Now, there is this key concept in API management that you should be aware of. So let's say that the existing API endpoint, this is the existing API endpoint from the SAP Gateway demo system. We could very easily from our application, from our iFlow, consume the APIs from the SAP Gateway demo system. So we could make a direct call to the SAP Gateway demo system and get all the information that we want. But what we are going to be doing is we are going to introduce the API management in the middle. So we have the API proxy that is going to sit in between the application, the iFlow, and the SAP Gateway demo system. So this is an extra layer. So why do I need this extra layer by using the API management? The reason why we need this extra layer is because we can apply policies in this API proxy layer. And by applying policies, we can make this into an enterprise-grade application. So some of the advantages of applying policies, you can have consistent management rules and policies. You can have rate limiting, you can have caching, and so on. So some of the terminologies in the API management that you should be aware of. So there is this concept called API provider. Now this API provider is a concept in API management, and this defines the connection details to the existing service. So in our case, we will be connecting to the SAP Gateway demo system. So this API provider will have connection details like the host name, the port, the credentials, and so on to connect to the SAP Gateway demo system. So that is the API provider. Now the API proxy, and this is what we saw right here. So this is the API proxy that's going to be sitting in the middle, and this is what our application is going to be talking to, our integration flow is going to be talking to. This, like I said, the applications connect to the API proxy. Now the policies, adds functionality to this API proxy. So, and the policies make the API proxy quite beneficial for enterprise-grade applications. Now, once you create this API proxy, what you can do is you can bundle one or more API proxies as a product for consumption, and this can be deployed to the API Enterprise Hub, and then a developer as an application, they can consume the product using an API key and secret. So these are some terminologies that you need to be aware of. Now API management, every software provider, like a software company nowadays, they all have some kind of API management solution. So take, for example, AWS or Google or Microsoft. They all have API management software because all these software companies, they understand the importance of having this API management in the middle. So the architecture will look something like this. So you have the SAP Gateway demo system on the top right here, and these are the APIs that we are actually going to be using. But we are not going to be using it directly. We are going to create an API proxy right here. Now this API provider, like I mentioned, this provides a means to connect to the SAP Gateway demo system. So you would provide the proxy, you would provide the host, the port, and so on. And we also talked about the API proxy, and then the policies. You apply policies on top of the API proxy to add functionality to this API proxy, and this is what makes the API management more beneficial to organizations. And then what you can do is you can take one or more API proxies, bundle it into a product, and deploy it to the SAP Business Enterprise Hub, and then your application can consume it using an API key and secret. So this is the architecture diagram that you should be aware of. Now, if you have worked with the Google API management, the gateway system, you will find that there are quite a bit of similarities between the SAP API management and the Google solution. And the reason is because the underlying company, so SAP's API management is based on Apigee, and Google at some point they acquired Apigee. So you will see there is a lot of similarities between the Google API Management Solution and the SAP API Management Solution. Okay, so we talked about policies, and we should know how we can enhance the functionality of the API proxy by applying policies and where to apply the policies. That is very critical. So we know that from the client application, we make a request to this API proxy, and then this API proxy in turn is going to make a request to the backend services. In our case, this is going to be the SAP Gateway Demo System, and then the response comes back to the client as well. It comes back to the API proxy and then from there to the client application. Now, where do I apply this policy? So we can break this into two different sections. So this is going to be the proxy endpoint. So the client's request is going to the API proxy, and this phase of the request, we can mark this as the proxy endpoint, and then from the API proxy to the backend services, we can mark that as the target endpoint. Now, as the request comes in, so there is going to be a pre-flow, and any policies that you apply here in the pre-flow in the request gets automatically applied. And then the conditional flow is only applied, the policies are only applied if the condition is met, and then you have the post flow where all the policies are applied as well. And this is in the proxy endpoint phase of the request. And then you have the target endpoint of the request, and same thing, any policies you apply here, they are applied to the pre-flow. Anything applied in the pre-flow is automatically applied. Conditional flow is only applied if the condition is met, and post-flow. And similarly, on the way back, the response as well, same thing. So the target endpoint pre-flow, there's the conditional flow and the post-flow. And then you come back here, and then you have the proxy endpoint pre-flow, conditional flow, and post-flow. And then you see there's also the post-client flow. Now, in the post-client flow, what you can do is if you need to do any kind of analytics or logging and so on, you can apply the policies here in the post-client flow. And the advantage here is it does not wait for it to complete. So as it triggers the policies, and then the response is sent to the client application. So all the analytics, so there's the latency time can be reduced. So if you need to do any analytics or if you need to do any logging, you put your policies here. So the policy is triggered, and then the response is immediately sent to the client application. So the client application does not have to wait for the policies to complete. And like I said, it is very critical that you apply the policies in the right phase, either in the proxy endpoint, post-flow response, and so on. It is very critical that you do it. For example, if you want to do some rate limiting and so on, it does not make sense to apply the rate limiting policies in the response. Or if you need to do any kind of restricting access using whitelisted IP addresses, or if you need to do some authentication checks, they all need to be done in the request phase. So definitely a good understanding of where to apply the policies is critical. So this is so this is the theory of the API management. In the next video, we will look at how to apply the policies and create the APIs in API management. See you in the next video.